But the answer that came up for that was, well, it was sort of implied in the when we were talking about it was, you know, you can just be honest about it and say that you don't want to participate in this, and people are generally pretty understanding. Maintaining right speech with children, particularly do you get angry with them and tell them off? Sometimes it's hard not to. Obeying road rules, particularly when you're in a rush. Gossiping and idle chatter. How do you avoid doing this in the workplace, particularly when there's pressure to talk and things like that? We've probably discussed that before. Someone did have a good way of dealing with it as well, but I haven't got enough notes to repeat that. Pest control we've talked about. So just it was pointed out as well that sometimes some amount of pest control could be necessary. We live in an imperfect world in samsara, and so, you know, for instance, if you want to protect a building which is important, say in the monastery or whatever, then sometimes you may need to get the pest controllers out for termites and things like that, and maybe that's an acceptable practice. Speaking up in difficult situations. It was just pointed out as a general point that we don't know what's good and bad necessarily until we see the outcome, so it takes some experience in these situations to start to understand how to deal with them. And then just finally that when we're dealing with humans in group situations, trying to make decisions, particularly on committees or meetings and things like that, then dealing with people's reactions to views they hold that are, you know, very tightly held and they don't want to give them up. Do you let go of your view, or do you keep pushing it? And because it's something that's important to you, how do you know if you're not clinging to something, I suppose, as well? So as I say, we didn't really get to much of the second part of the question. We discussed all the problems, but not many solutions. So I'll leave that to you.
Thanks, Patrick. Can we have, Prem, are you representing your group? Oh. Yeah. Wait, I think his mic, can you turn on his mic? No.
Quite okay. Yes, now there's something there. Okay,
now.
Cool, good. So, of course, we had many things that have repeated, so just let me have a look. But one person, or actually two people here, were kind of saying, you know, they are lay people and there is worldly pleasures to be had in the world, and they sometimes don't want to, you know, give them up straight away, or they are kind of reflecting on, you know, there is the spiritual life or the spiritual whatever, and the worldly, the spiritual pleasures, let's call them spiritual pleasures, and to kind of find a balance there, or to find, you know, in which direction you want to move. So that was one of the dilemmas there. About voicing your opinion, if it's needed, and how to do that to make sure you don't, you know, make the situation worse. It's actually beneficial. That was an interesting one. So when you're caring for a dementia patient, and the patient asks the same question again and again, and you know that a specific answer will upset them, but you don't want to, you know, have the same thing happening again and again, especially, you know, is my husband still alive? Where is he? And then you have to say every day he's actually passed, and that would be very sad for the person. How to handle if there is divisive speech happening in the workplace or with the people you're working with, sometimes when you're a third party as well, how do you, you know, handle that? We had a few solutions for that there. Maintaining right speech in social situations. One person was saying that, you know, they always reflect and see how can I fall back on the precepts, how can I fall back onto the Dhamma whenever a situation arises. That is difficult. Again, people in work, you know, that might have different values that don't agree with the Buddhist values, how to handle that. one person was saying that they actually quit their jobs many times because they felt it just didn't work in the workplace. Neighbors was one of those topics, I'm sure. A lot of people who have neighbors can relate to that. Okay. Sometimes, yes, to remain silent, to keep out of trouble. Is that the right thing? So you are keeping silent to make sure that it's not troublesome for the other person. But we also spoke about, sometimes the truth has to be brought out because it's really important, even though it hurts. If it's beneficial, pest management, we had that. Yes, and then also if you know, for example, that a person has problem with addiction, how do you, reach out or don't reach out and make sure that it doesn't go down the wrong way, that they, might think they lose their job because you brought up that topic with them, something like that. I hope I was able to cover the things we discussed and some of the solutions. We might be able to go into it a bit later as well. Okay.
Thanks, Venerable. Can we have this group who's...
Hello. So we had some repeats. I'll just say what is not repeated. Maintaining right speech, especially on the internet, where there's a lot of different opinions and views. I think the person who said this had a solution already to switch off the internet, unless you really needed it. Yeah, and then there's the guilt of eating animals versus eating whatever's given. Pest control was talked about in the context of a workplace, like if you're working in a kitchen. What is the right response for bullying and abusive behavior? Do you let go, stand up, or fight for justice without being abusive yourself? And how to remain trusting with people without being taken advantage of? And then for right speech, sometimes people try to hold it in, but it end up being passive aggressive. So what's the solution for that? And then I think overall we kind of agreed on a principle that we should just choose the option that is the least harm, because sometimes you can't get it all right. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we have the last?
Hey, we were talking about acting with harmony and peace. For example, giving praise when somebody cooks something and say something to a person in a way that will not upset them, to be peaceful. And we were discussing differences between monastic and not monastic. Following the rules, it's easier for the monastic because they're living the rules and they have the rules. We were also talking that if somebody does something unethical, the first time maybe just let it be. But if it happens again, if it's recurring, then say something about it. And we not always have the full story, so sometimes it's difficult to know what to do. And we were talking that monastics have greater commitments to the rules. And for example, somebody said that when people have hard times and they want to bend, sometimes it's better not to allow it. It may affect our view of that person. So have compassion, listen, and to maybe make hot chocolate for that person. Taking precepts every day, taking time, wishing metta to all the beings, and examine one's thoughts, being peaceful, and doing better next time. And so, for example, in the evening, examine the day, have like a review, and encourage others to have metta. Think before talk. For example, like if somebody cooks, we say thank you without trying the food, we're thanking somebody for cooking it for us. And some of us get stuck on the right views, so it's about the choices we make, the review, and encourage people to follow the path. taking on the precepts can help make ethical decisions as well. And there are bad thoughts, and how we get rid of them? We use good thoughts to overcome the bad thoughts. And we were talking also that it's more difficult to say the truth to someone close to us. We don't want to hurt them, especially if it's family. What do we do? Do we stay away? Do we confront it? It's difficult. Families have difficulties. So we need to understand people, have compassion, and learn. To help people use patience, metta, teaching metta, using loving kindness, and also to know when to step in to help, to interfere, or when not to do that, when not to speak. And ethical decision regarding advising friends, for example, if there are complications with pregnancy, what to do. It's easier to make this decision for ourselves because we know ourselves, but it's more difficult to advise somebody about it. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think if you didn't catch what she was saying, or rather you didn't catch out of what she was saying, there was one that came from Ajahn Brahmali as we were going around, and then when it comes to him, and he just said 2 words, bad thoughts. So that's the unethical difficulties. Yeah. And then we're like, so how do you resolve them? Good thoughts. and I think it's going to talk more during Sutta retreat or something.
Yeah.
Or like, no, 5 ways of removing resentment.
Next Saturday as well.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
That one is on our program, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you make of this, Venerable Bodhi? Do you want to?
Oh, well, I mean, so many things. I just found it was very, very nice to see that people were so open to share about, what is difficult for them. And one thing which stuck with me a little bit because I was preparing one of those suttas where a layperson comes to Ananda and says, oh, we are lay people and we enjoy worldly pleasures. Renunciation is like an abyss. What do we do about this? And then the kind of sutta evolves, and he says, you gain confidence into renunciation, and you actually realize the peace that comes with renunciation, and that will help you to replace one with the other eventually over time. Okay. So that's what came to mind there. And the other thing I was mentioning, that with killing, for example, it's the next one coming up, so that we would cover that. That's what comes to mind. What did you?
Quite a few. There was a lot of things. One of them was the things that we don't really come across so much, like in the workplace. Where actually, we also have our workplace, I suppose.
Yes.
But the monastery would be the same things, same principles.
It would. Depending where you are in the monastery.
So, gossip in the workplace and bad speech in the workplace. How you deal with that. And very often, I don't think you don't have to engage all that much. If you look at the way we do things in the monastery, a lot of monks, they never really hang around at all. They're always back in their kutis. They never really stay around. And that's a nice way of doing it. You don't really have to socialize all that much. You socialize what is required, kind of what is, otherwise it starts to look strange. But doing your own thing is okay. And I think that's true also in the workplace, because it is just simply a fact that if you hang around other people who do dodgy stuff, you will be affected, and there's just no way around that, really. So sometimes the best way is just to withdraw a little bit. And the one I like is the fly sprayer one. That's a good one.
Yes.
Well, that's Patrick. Okay. So what do you do if someone wants to ask you to buy fly spray, or they ask you to buy alcohol, or maybe something like that? What should your reaction be? And I think very often the right thing to do is to say, well, it's their choice. If they want fly spray, what can you do? And sometimes if you try to explain to them why they shouldn't do it, often it backfires. It becomes even worse. It's better if they find out, by themselves that you actually don't believe in killing, and still you kind of supported them in that particular case out of kindness, simply to help them out, in their own way. I don't think we cannot stop other people from doing things by saying no in that kind of situation. They have to understand the problem, then something will happen. And there are some examples of that not in the sutta, but I think in the Jataka literature as well, where there was a husband who was a hunter, and every day the wife would kind of give him his weapons before he went out hunting. So the question is, does she make any bad karma because of that? And probably not. She's just helping her husband. She doesn't really have any intention for him to kill the animals. It depends on her motivation, of course, but if you don't have that intention, then there's no bad karma involved in that. So it's true, you have an obligation to help others, or to kind of help others in the right direction. Of course, you have that kind of obligation, but you have to know time and place, and this is kind of the tricky part there.
Well, that actually reminds me of the time when I didn't do the military training, and I offered to help in Switzerland, and one of the jobs was I was on a farm for 3 months up in the hills in the mountains. Yeah. And the people knew I was a Buddhist. I was meditating and reading Buddhist things and listening to Buddhist things. And in the shed, you often get a lot of flies. And you get these sticky papers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. So they asked me to put the sticky paper up. Yeah. And I kind of looked at them and was like, oh, no, I don't want to. And it was interesting. So you saw the person reflecting about it for a little while, kind of realizing what was going on. But then she turned around to me and said, but they are annoying. And I was like, oh, okay. Because it's such a bad death for flies. My goodness, they just stick on the paper and they have a slow death.
It's not very nice, is it? Yeah.
Some of those situations, you get into those ones. Yeah. And the other thing you were mentioning with, discussions, and I was just also trying as a solution to bring up if people are talking bad about another person. Of course, sometimes you don't engage, but sometimes when you're there, if you can raise something positive about those people, or try to, lead the conversation somewhere else, then you can influence it a little bit. Yeah. But it's their karma. Yeah. I agree with you there. Yeah.
Sometimes it's quite easy to lead the conversation somewhere else, because people often have so little mindfulness, they don't know what they're talking about. So if you just kind of gently, it just happens. Yeah. I do that with my mother a lot. Yeah. She'd start talking, and I kind of just lead it astray, and she,
She follows along.
She follows along. Yeah. No problem. Right. Yeah. Oh, oops. Sorry, Mom. No, I think she would be okay. She would be okay with that. So, And shall we carry on?
Sure.
Because I think time is going very fast. Yeah.
As usual. Yes.
As usual. Yeah. So let's move on to the next one.
Right. Action.
Noble Eightfold Path. Oh, that's what we're doing. Okay.
Yes. Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Early Buddhism. Yeah. More or less. Yeah. No.
Right action. So we come to right action. And again, as I mentioned this morning, it kind of comes out quite naturally from right intention. Yeah, if you understand the importance of morality, then obviously you want to act in accordance with that morality. And again, there's a difference there between not doing bad acts and then consciously doing good acts. Both of these are part of right action. So let's see I can't remember what's going on now, so let's see what happens at right action. Okay, so this is like the Vibhanga Sutta, and it defines right action. And there's 3 kinds of right action talked about in this Vibhanga Sutta. What is right action? And the first one is to avoid killing. And of course, in Buddhism, this means all kind of killing, and that's why people were talking about cockroaches. And I had someone on the internet, they were asking what about parasites? And they were writing this long email to me saying how it was wrong to kill parasites. So I thought, okay, maybe I can bring that up today as well. We can talk about parasites as well. So killing, avoiding killing is the first part. Avoiding stealing, taking what is not given is kind of the way it is expressed in the Pali, but stealing in kind of typical English. And the last one is sexual activity or sexual misconduct. Well, there's two things here. One is it's kind of interesting because it's not consistent the way this is defined in the suttas. Sometimes it is defined as sexual activity, so it's like brahmacharya or abrahmacharya viramani, abstaining from sexual activity. Sometimes it is abstaining from sexual misconduct, kamesu michachara. So it depends a little bit. And you can see one is then obviously for lay Buddhists, the other one is then for monastics. So let us delve into this. So starting with killing. avoiding killing here. I can't remember what I've got here anymore now. Okay, so they give up killing living creatures, renouncing rod and sword. It doesn't really. I don't know about this translation. Renouncing rod. Does it? I mean, people when they hear that, it sounds like something out of the Bible, something kind of 2,500 years old, doesn't it? Have you renounced the rod yet?
Yes. I think Sujata had something else.
Did he?
He put some modern words in there.
Did he?
But I
Okay.
can't remember now what it was.
Yeah, because it sounds a bit kind of out of some kind of ancient text that you dug on the ground and sit there for 2,000 years to dig it out. Oh, rod, give up the rod.
Yes. As long as it's not the club.
Not the club, yeah. So, but basically the idea of rod, as I mentioned last time, is the idea of both punishment and violence. It really comes down to violence. So renouncing violence, I think, might be a better translation, renouncing violence and punishment, something like that. That would be more a modern translation. It's very hard to translate sometimes. You kind of just go along with the flow and you forget that this is not really ordinary English anymore. Yeah. And then you have this beautiful second part, which is then the positive side of not killing. Yeah, you are scrupulous and kind, living full of compassion for living beings. And this is such an important part because this shows you the idea of the motivation that is supposed to lie behind avoiding killing living beings. Avoiding killing living beings means being compassionate. And once you get that, then you start to understand what this precept really is about. It is about the motivation where we're coming from, not so much the actual act. Because if the motivation is right, then the acts will automatically be right as a consequence. So this is where all the ethical dilemmas, and we can resolve all the ethical dilemmas by remembering that very significant point. Motivation is what matters. So let us now look at some of the principles of this precept. What are some of the things that we need to take into account when we consider avoiding killing? And the first one is that there are a number of degrees for this particular precept. Killing can happen in so many different ways. And it matters enormously how we kill, where we're coming from, and all of these kind of things, what it is that we kill. All of these things matter to decide what are the ethical consequences. Is it bad karma? Is it good karma? And all of these kind of things. And of course, one of the first things that we need to understand is that very often people ask, is this good karma or is it bad karma? And very often I think we need to get out of that kind of idea that things are either good or bad. It's not as simple as that. A lot of the time things are kind of in the middle. They're neither good nor bad. And you cannot divide it up very simply into good or bad karma. And once we understand this idea again of this spectrum, the scale of grey from dark grey to kind of very light shades of grey, then we have an idea of how to think about karma, which I think is often more useful. We're trying to move towards the lighter end of the spectrum of grey. So killing, obviously the worst kind of killing is if killing human beings. That is really, really bad. That is worse than killing animals. And the reason is because human beings are more developed than animals. They have more good qualities. You're killing something with more good qualities. And for that reason, if you kill someone who is a very good person, the better they are as a person, the worse is the karma that you get. If you kill an arahant, it's bad news. Please don't kill any arahants. Promise? What? Arahants, fully enlightened beings.
Fully enlightened.
So don't kill the fully enlightened beings. Leave them alone, because that's a bad idea to do that. Of course, you don't really know who they are, but you can have rough guesstimates. Sometimes you find someone, wow, this person is pretty impressive. So okay, leave those alone. Don't mess with them.
So the pilot of the plane which went down with all those monks.
Well,
but again, the intention.
I don't think there was an intention there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, all of these things matters, and we're going to talk a little bit more about abortion later on. I'm not going to tell anyone whether abortion is good or bad. I'm just going to talk about the principles behind it. What are the karmic consequences of these things? So there are all kinds of degrees of killing, and one of the, of course, the important factors here is what is our motivation. And I will talk about this in the context of euthanasia. Here in Australia, it's called, in WA, we have the idea of voluntary assisted dying. Yeah, VAD. It was recently passed by the Parliament in WA, and apparently is coming into force in WA on the 1st of July this year. And from then on, it will be you have this idea of voluntary assisted dying, where somebody actually is allowed to help you to end your own life if you feel that your life has no value. And there has a number of things that have to be fulfilled. You have to have a terminal disease. You have to have some unbearable pain you can't deal with. You have to have a persistent request to let go, to end your life. Yeah, so there's all these things that have to be satisfied before you can do it. But so, what again, how do we deal with these kind of things? And their motivation is a very important factor with these things. And then we have degrees of killing. Then we come to I'll talk about these things later, but then we come to what about animals? Yeah, animals is a lesser kind of killing than killing human beings. But the animal realm itself is so diverse. Yeah, from elephants and maybe the great apes, gorillas, that sort of thing, chimpanzees or whatever, and then down to cockroaches. Is it okay to kill cockroaches? Yeah. What if those cockroaches are really annoying? Is that a good enough reason to kill them if they're really annoying? Sometimes people are annoying. Is that good enough reason to kill them? And yeah, annoying is not good enough. Yeah, it doesn't really work that way. You can't just kill things. But the point here is that there is a vast scale. There's a big difference between killing an elephant and killing a cockroach or killing a mosquito, for example. It's a big difference. Much worse to kill an elephant. Why? Because it is a more evolved animal, just like humans are more evolved than animals. In the same way, the elephants are more evolved than cockroaches. So you have to kind of see the kind of being that we are talking about. More evolved means worse karma. The simpler the being is, the less the karma is. They have less also experience of pain and of attachment to life and all of these kind of things. So this is one principle, to remember that even if you do kill a mosquito, even if you have killed a few mosquitoes in your life, and thinking back to myself, have I killed a few mosquitoes? Yes. Not as a monk, actually, but before I became a monk, yes, I killed mosquitoes. And, I wish I hadn't, but I don't feel terribly bad about killing a mosquito. It's not kind of the worst crime in the universe. It's a fairly low on the level of things. So this is the first thing to remember. The second thing is that these precepts, remember, the idea is to be as pure as possible. Every little act you do that is wrong, every little act that is negative, even if it is slightly negative, will take you in the wrong direction. It's like taking one step back when really you want to take a step forward at every possible time. Every time you take a step back, you are letting yourself down. Yeah, you are one more step away from awakening for enlightenment if you do that. So it is a massive opportunity, in fact, to avoid killing things like even mosquitoes or cockroaches. It's a great opportunity to learn, to look at the world in a new way and purify yourself even further, getting away from the idea of killing. So how can we do this? What are some skillful means? And one of the terrible things in much of Western culture, until recently, has been this idea that animals aren't really worth looking after because they don't have a soul or something like that, which used to be a common idea in the West. But as science has progressed, become more and more clear that animals are in many ways very similar to us. They have emotions, they have feelings, they want to live. Yeah, the similarities are astonishing, and sometimes they are very intelligent even. And even though they cannot express that intelligence outwardly, actually it is there under the surface. So what we try to do is to anthropomorphize the animals a little bit, to see them almost as humans. And then when you do that, you start to become much easier to be kind and caring for the animals. It's fairly easy for large animals, cats and dogs and all of these kind of things. It's a bit more difficult with a cockroach. But it is still the same. Cockroach doesn't want to die. A cockroach wants to live. They may look disgusting on the surface, but inside there is something that wants to exist. I want to exist too. They don't know that they look disgusting for human beings, And so you try to understand that. They want to live. If you were born as a cockroach, would you want to be smashed under a shoe or something? Probably not. So then you find a new way of dealing with them. You find a way of scooping them up in a dustpan or something, or maybe having a jar and putting something under. And then you take them outside and throw them outside instead of squashing them. And then that is really the best way to do it. With mosquitoes can be terribly irritating. They're kind of, buzzing around in your room at night. You can't fall asleep because the mosquito's buzzing around in your room. But again, what's the big deal? If you get a bump on your arm in the morning, big deal, yeah? Okay, mosquito, come here, have a feed. It's okay. I can deal with this in the morning, yeah. So try to deal with these things in a good way. And this is exactly what we should do. We should see all of those things as a potential for growth. And if you see them as a potential for growth, you're going to go a long way on this Buddhist path. Every time you have an ethical dilemma or difficulty, it is a possibility to move forward. Every time you have a family member who you find difficult, and I think most people have that, certain family members that are hard to deal with, it is an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for compassion. Don't expect them to get better, yeah? We had someone on our group said, oh, this person, they're always the same. They're getting old. They should be getting better. There's no such thing as should be getting better. Yeah, forget about that. There is maybe worse, maybe better, maybe the same. It's got nothing to do with us. We can't control whether other people get better or worse. Yeah, our job is to have compassion. This person, they don't know what they're doing. They are the one who have a problem. Yeah, they are the one who are going to have to reap the consequences of their own stupidity. It's time to have compassion for a person like that. Yeah, don't put yourself in harm's way too much. Stay out of their orbit a little bit. Don't kind of be there too much. But occasionally, if you have to be with them, just bring up this mind of compassion. Yeah, and then you can deal with things much better if you do that. Anyways, there's whole degrees of killing here. It depends what we are killing here. And if occasionally you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up for making a mistake. Yeah, this is not the Buddhist way. Then in that case, have compassion for yourself. Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And if that wasn't the case, then it would be really hard. So remember, degrees of killing, and it comes very much down to our motivation. What is driving us? And this is the second thing that we find here when it comes to euthanasia or voluntary assisted dying. Is this okay from a Buddhist point of view? And the answer is, it depends how you do it. Yeah, I would say that many Buddhists would argue that it's never okay to have voluntary assisted dying. Euthanasia is a bit more controversial, because euthanasia can actually mean killing someone, out of compassion, but without asking them. But it should always be voluntary at the very least. So voluntary assisted dying, I think, is a better term, more easy to understand. So is it wrong? Well, the question we should ask ourselves, do we have the right to keep someone alive against their own wishes? What if someone really wants to die and someone had enough and they are in their right mind? Are we around to tell them, I'm going to keep you alive regardless? Is that compassionate? That can also be wrong. Yeah, that can also be a sense of hardness towards the other person by forcing them to be alive against their own wishes. So this is not one-sided. It is about how we do these things. Yeah, and if we do these things with wisdom, with compassion, with understanding, we make sure that we have the right safeguards in place, whereby it is a persistent request that goes over a long period of time. We know that they're doing this in the right way. I had a very interesting, actually, experience. I had one. There's an Englishman who knew me from when I lived in England 20, 30 years ago, or whatever. And he precisely came to me and asked for assistance with this particular thing. And he said, is it wrong to end your own life? And I said, well, it depends on the circumstances, but not always wrong. As I understand Kamma in the sutras, as I understand Buddhist ethics, it's not always wrong. It is really how you do it that matters. And then lo and behold, he ended his own life. And that's kind of interesting. Yeah, he did it in the right way. He went to Switzerland. He went to your home country, Bodhi. To Dignitas.
It's not my country.
Dignitas. Because Switzerland has this clinic where you can end your life in a kind of humane way, right? Dignitas, dignity in Latin or whatever it is. Yeah. So he went there and he ended his own life because he had some kind of muscular dystrophy that was very hard to deal with, and he was basically degenerating, and he was becoming like a complete vegetable, and there's nothing he could do about it. And that was interesting because then it moves from the theoretical to the real. Yeah, it's very easy to have theoretical opinions. And afterwards, how did I feel about it? It was no problem. I was actually quite, I never recommended to him to do this. I just told him that this is the Buddhist teaching. These are probably the karmic consequences if you do it in this way or if you do it in that way. And then based on that, he decided to do this. So that was kind of interesting. So again, and he was one of those who, in my opinion, did it in the right way. And then it's okay. So you have to look into your heart. You have to know your own motivations. It's impossible for anyone else to tell you whether what you're doing is right or wrong. Yeah, it has to come from you. You have to know. And if you are feeling it is the right thing, you're not doing it just because you are depressed or sad, but because you really think this is the right way to go, you have no quality of life, then I don't think there is any big issue there. So that is one example of how this precept is not as square as we would have it to be. It's not absolute. The idea of the first precept, not to kill any living beings, is an approximation to the truth. The real kamma, the real ethical principle, is not to do anything from the wrong motivation. That is always the real ethical principle in Buddhism. It can be hard to apply, and because it's hard to apply, we have approximations like the 5 precepts. It gives us very clear guidelines. Often that is easier to use, but occasionally it might be better to go back to the final principles that govern these ethical dilemmas. So let's have a look. Actually, what am I doing? Okay. So then we have the idea of abortion. I will talk about that a little bit in a second. But first of all, again, voluntary assisted dying, and again, it's the idea of compassion that really matters. It's why we do it, the motivation that really matters in this case. So let's have a look at the idea of abortion. What do we find in the suttas on this particular topic? And one of the typical passages that's quoted regarding this in the suttas is found in 2 suttas, one in Majjhima Nikaya 38 and one in Majjhima Nikaya 93. And this is what this sutta says. An embryo is conceived when these 3 things come together. 3 things coming together, that is when you have an embryo. What are the 3 things? Mother and father come together. The mother is in the fertile season, fertile period. And then the last one, this is the one which really kind of is interesting from a Buddhist point of view. The spirit being reborn is present. The Gandhabba is the Pali word here, is present. And when that spirit being is there, that is when things can happen. So what exactly does this mean? Does this mean that all of these 3 things have to be there at the same time? Or can there be a time delay? The spirit being comes later, for example, and then when the 3 come together at that point later on, that is when it comes together. It's not exactly obvious. And I don't think there is any final answer to this, but a lot of the anecdotal evidence that we hear about people who maybe remember their past lives and all of these kind of things, to me, suggest that the spirit or the consciousness does not arise straight away in a being. There can be some time period before that spirit being actually arises. And that's the one, I think that is it's very hard to know for sure, but it's a reasonable supposition depending on what you would probably have to call anecdotal evidence, because there isn't any final evidence for this. But there's another thing which is important here, and that this particular view in the suttas is not actually presented as a Buddhist view. It is presented as this. This is the Buddha speaking. Do you know how an embryo is conceived? And then the Brahmins reply, yes, we do. So in other words, the view, this particular view, is presented as a Brahmanical view. The view in society at large at the time of the Buddha, not as a specific view of the Buddhists. And there doesn't seem to be any clear Buddhist view, and perhaps the reason why there isn't a clear view is because there isn't any clear view about this. It may vary depending on the circumstances. So what does all of this mean in practical terms? And what it means is that it is very hard to know whether consciousness is there in an embryo. Yeah, it may, whether at what point it arises in an embryo is very difficult to know. Before consciousness arises, then there is no ethical consequences, yeah? Because if the being is not able to feel, if it's just matter, yeah, of course, then there's no problem. It's like a rock, it doesn't really have any effect. But the moment consciousness arises and the being is able to feel something, that is where the ethical consequences begin, because then you are actually killing an existing being at that particular point. So one of the things to decide is whether there is consciousness there, and the earlier you have an abortion, the earlier it is, the less likely it is that there will be any consciousness. Yeah? So the consequences will be maybe even zero if you do it very, very early on. The other thing is to remember that an embryo is like at the very beginning, it is like almost like an insect. It's a very, very small thing. I mean, at the very beginning it's tiny, it's almost microscopic, but then gradually it expands. And the earlier you have a termination, the less karmic consequence there is, because the being is very undeveloped. It's a bit like an insect or maybe a very small animal at the beginning. And the longer, the more time passes, the more developed that embryo is, of course, the worse the karmic consequences are going to be. So it's a very complicated thing, and you can't really give a final answer to whether how bad the karma is, whether there is bad karma or not. And the reality is that ideally, I think one would want to avoid abortions if possible. It is a bit like, it is not something that is ideal. But the reality is that often these are very difficult questions. And often there are all kinds of things that come into this. Things like your ability to look after a child, how that pregnancy came about, and all of these issues that can often be very, very hard. So I think it is not right to condemn anyone if someone has an abortion. I don't think that is the right Buddhist view of things. But rather to say, if you're going to have an abortion, then be careful and be and understand that if you want to reduce the karma, do it as early as possible, because that is when it has the minimum karmic consequences. And also that having an abortion of an embryo is always going to be far less bad karma than to, for example, kill a human being, which is going to be much, much worse, obviously, if you kill a fully grown human being. So these are just some of the ethical implications. There isn't any final absolute thing. And personally, I would never, ever condemn anyone for having an abortion. It's entirely up to the person to decide, but just to have some ideas of the ethical framework around how to do these things. And so you try to do these things in a wise and skillful way, rather than to do these things kind of blindly and stupidly. Okay, so that is the abortion issue, maybe, yeah. So it's a tricky one, but that's how I tend to view things. And you are very welcome to disagree with me. I'm very happy for people to disagree on these issues. So don't. I'm not going to take any. You're not going to become my enemy for life if you disagree with me. I promise. So, time is going faster. What is the next one? Oh, okay, so we're moving on. Okay, so let's have a short break, because that's a lot of things happening already. Yes. Let's just have 5 minutes of meditation. Okay, everyone. Any questions on this? Any comments? Anyone want to say anything here? Venerable Achala? Yeah. Let's go. I'll just get a Venerable first of all, then Prem. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I'm not sure if I can take any more coffee, Venerable, but anyway, that's very kind of you. Huh? My sister, certainly right action, but wrong. I think if I'd.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Please, Venerable. We can't hear you at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe swap.
Is it okay to ask a question about right speech?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. Please.
Is right listening, does that come anywhere in the path?
Right listening, yeah.
I know Ajahn Brahmali talks about it quite a bit.
Yeah, right listening, yeah. I guess it's part of right speech, in a sense, yeah. You are quiet, you are silent at the right time. And that's probably what it is. If someone else talks, you just wait your turn and talk at the right time. I would say it's part of right speech, probably right listening, yeah. But I don't think it is kind of mentioned anywhere in the suttas about right listening here. Yeah.
Also about getting the facts right. I mean, I do recall every time something was brought up that happened, and they told the Buddha, he would always try to find the person that was involved and ask, is this actually true? So I guess there is some listening involved in that as well. Venerable Karunika, you have some comment?
Yeah, no, I have a comment on that. There is Sovachasata and Dovachasata as a very important part. It's almost like a prerequisite before starting the Noble Eightfold Path.
That's very true, actually.
Like if you have Kalyana Mitta, you need, if you don't listen properly, if you don't know how to listen.
That's a specific kind of listening. It's a kind of being easy to correct. That's really what it means. So being easy to correct as a person. The specific, easy to admonish, specific kind of listening. And this is one of the qualities of a good monastic, or probably good layperson as well, that you should be easy to admonish, and you should take admonishment well. Yeah.
And I wonder. I mean, I was talking about honesty and openness, and not lying. Kind of can also have this implication of being open to receive, that admonishment, or to receive, criticism in that respect. Yeah.
And also, before starting the sutta, most of the time the Buddha says, Tansunata sadhukam manasikarota, so there is again, listening comes up.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's great. That's good. Yeah, many good references there. Great. Yeah. So listen. So in other words, in English means listen monks. So listen whoever I will speak. Pay proper attention. Yeah.
My other question is actually, you keep mentioning about the motivation. Is it good to explain the motivation a little bit more?
We did that last time. We did this book at great length. Sankappa, Sammasankappa.
Not just as Sammasankappa. I have heard also Ajahn Brahmali mentioning, like with all those controversial decisions, and you have to make a decision, like using the 4 agatis as a help. So I thought it might be helpful if you were to explain a little bit, because that's I found it myself when I first heard that teaching very helpful to make any decisions which have ethical dilemmas, to use the chanda, raga, dosa, moha, bhaya. So if you're not doing it out of any one of those, so if Ajahn or Venerable Bodhidhaja could say a few words for everybody, would be very helpful.
You can say something because you wanted to.
Well, I mean, yes, I did have the slide in there, which, well, I mean, you've already explained it, that Ajahn Brahmali very often says when a decision comes up, a really important decision, you want to make sure that you have a clear mind and a calm mind as much as possible. So if you can take a bit of time, step back out of the situation and not just, decide it on the fly, and then make sure that there is no defilements in your mind. So no greed, no aversion, no confusion, no delusion. And interestingly, fear is mentioned in there as well. So I don't recall fear coming up that many times in the suttas. And very often we are kind of pushed in a corner or something, and fear comes up, and because of fear or because of what we are afraid how we're going to be perceived, and all these kind of things can have a big impact. But I mean, especially with all these things that Ajahn Brahmali just discussed. I mean, they're really, really difficult topics. And I assume, 98% of the time it's kind of clear and we don't have to talk about these things, but then they suddenly do arise. So that the people also get an understanding that most of the time it's fairly clear, hopefully, but then there is these areas where we have to talk about. And one thing, I mean, I'm just listening and learning at this moment, but one of the things that really touched me when I was listening Ajahn Brahm talk about these things, that he would always listen again to the person who comes with the problem and then give them advice, like Ajahn Brahmali was doing just now, but saying it is your decision and you'll have to make this decision based on the circumstances that you're in. But always know, whatever choice you will make, I will always support you. I think that, for me, was the most important takeaway from there. Right? If you wish to add anything?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, for Agatis is it's a good way. It's basically the same thing as saying not coming from defilements, really. So, yeah. Okay. Prem, did you want to say something?
Please. And then we have...
right speech, I think, should include right writing as well.
Right writing.
Right
yeah,
writing,
absolutely.
Yes. Email and social media, Facebook, all those things we had to be. I suppose when you're writing, it gives you a second chance to say the right thing. Yeah. If you're talking to a person, where you want to convey
Yeah. That's a very, very good point. And there's so much unskillful speech or writing online. Yeah, people become crazy when they go online. They become really stupid, as if.
Make use of the possibility to revise and review what you write.
I never send an email straight away. I always reread it once or twice before I send it. Always, as a matter of course. Because it's so easy to sometimes be, even if you're just being a little bit insensitive, it means that the other side, people are going to feel that insensitivity. So add a little nice word in there, something positive,
Sandwiched.
Sandwich, and always remind yourself that it's always, every opportunity, whether it's speech or writing, is an opportunity to do something nice for people, It's nice if the other person feels good when they receive your email, rather than feeling kind of let down or negative or whatever. That's a very good, very important point, especially in this internet age. It's very easy when you write something, especially on the internet, to feel, you don't feel that there's another human being there, But actually, that's the whole point. There are human beings there with feelings who are touched by these things. But very much so.
Yeah, I think someone mentioned that in one of the discussion groups that came up, what do you do when you're on forums? And one thing which I feel important there is as well, as you were saying, sometimes people don't even have their names on there, so it feels even more unreal. They're like hiding behind an avatar or an acronym, and they can troll people and all these kind of things. So just to imagine you're actually there speaking to a person, then hopefully that will bring up a bit of hiriotapa, a bit of...
I think it's always a good idea to go on these places with your full name and be very clear about who you are. I think that's much more, unless it is a very... I mean, sometimes people want to be anonymous because of for political reasons, and that's fair enough. But in general, if you can, you should be there with your name, and you should be honest about who you are, and it makes interactions much better as a consequence.
Or I mean, sometimes there is pages where you don't want to give your identity away because there is addictions or abuse or whatever. But then once the first contact is made, that you actually connect with people you can trust, and then have a conversation. The other thing to remember, that actually stays up there unless someone goes and deletes it because it was so bad. So, we say something in a conversation, and of course it's not gone, but it's kind of gone. And on the internet, it sometimes just stays there, and people can Google it up later down the track or whatever. So please really be careful with these kind of things. Think about it twice. We have more questions from there as well.
Okay, shall we ask them fairly quickly?
I think we can maybe get through one more and then do the third one in the next session. Do you think that's okay?
There's quite a lot here, but let's just very simply go down the track. What is the reason for craving? Feeling. Anything to add? No. We crave because we feel, and we want to feel good. So we crave for those things, and then when bad feelings come, then we crave to get rid of those. It's as simple as that. It comes because of feeling. Because we feel, we crave. that was from Bhavini from India. Hello, Bhavini. And this is from Gio from the USA. When using right speech, should I remember these points or just use wisdom power? Just use wisdom power. Yeah, if you go around trying to remember all these points, you're going to screw your head up because you have too many things to remember. So just be wise. What feels right at the time? Am I coming from defilements or am I coming from purity? Yeah, just ask yourself some simple questions like that. Say to yourself, am I being kind or not? If you're being kind, you're in business.
And find the right time, then very often you don't have to ask all these things if you're in the right mind state.
Yeah. This is from Chaminda from Adelaide. What about if you have to give some negative feedback at work and sometimes being truthful can hurt others' feelings? Yes, it's true, but it's not about sometimes hurting feelings is necessary. We have seen this before. The Buddha also did that sometimes for the long-term benefit. And of course, if you have a job, then you have to make sure the company survives. Yeah, it's kind of important. And if someone does something that is not really good, you have to sometimes give negative feedback. Make sure you do it with kindness. Just ask yourself where you're coming from. Yeah, if you're coming from a good place, it's no problem. From Robert, is ego the cause of most false speech? Either a person goes against an idea, even though it's good, because it didn't come from him. What skillful way can we do to get his agreement? You want to try or have?
Well, I mean, one part, of course, you could say it's self and it's ego, but I mean, the other thing is it's also a habit, as we were talking about, swearing before, for example. If that is a way you are used to speak, it's quite difficult to actually get out of it. So it needs a lot of training in a different direction or an exposure to be with people who don't really speak in that way. So I don't think it's necessarily always has to be this bad and a very strong ego behind what comes out. Yeah.
I think it can come from all kinds of things. Yeah, false speech comes from craving, just craving something in the world, and then you lie because you want to get something. You use false speech to seal a business deal or whatever. Or it can be anger. It can be all kinds of things. But ego is certainly one. So what skillful way can you use to get someone's agreement if they're coming from ego? You just have to wait for the right time and right place. Sometimes you sow the seeds, and when they are ready, when the ego kind of is lowering its guard a little bit, that seed will sprout because the ego is kind of going down a little bit. Egos are not stable. They're kind of things that come and go. So sometimes you sow the seed, and the result will come down the track.
Well, and get someone's agreement. I mean, sometimes we also have to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person and just think, what is the most beneficial thing for that person? And maybe that's not to agree with what we feel is the best for them.
Yeah.
So we also sometimes have to give up our views in this and support the other person in the right direction. But of course, I don't know what the actual situation is for the person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually one more thing that I said I was going to talk about was parasites.
All right, there we go, parasites.
So
how
let's
do we
go
into that? Sure.
What do we do if you have a parasite in your body, like some kind of intestinal worm, for example? Is it okay to kill that worm if you have an intestinal worm? And I would say that this is one of those cases where, again, sometimes living with parasites can be very problematic. It depends on what it does to your system. I guess if there is no consequences from it, it's a parasite that doesn't do much damage or whatever, and you're happy to live with the parasite in your body, you can do that. Okay, then it's fine. But if it's causing you problems and you want to deal with it somehow, you want to get better, then it's always a balance about your own health and the being, the parasitical being. Yeah. So what do we do in many of those cases? And I think as long as it's important in Buddhism to have compassion towards ourselves as well, and to balance compassion towards ourselves with the benefit for that being. I think in many of these cases it is right to have compassion for yourself and put that a little bit higher, especially when it is a parasitical being, because it can be very problematic for your health if you keep on doing this. a lot of the beings in the world are small beings. Like, what about bacteria, for example? Do they have consciousness? And I don't know the answer to that, but it is conceivable that some of these tiny beings, like amoebas or whatever, that maybe they do have consciousness. Maybe they can experience pain. So at what point do we stop taking medicines? At what point do we, what do we do with all of these very difficult situations? And I would say, in general, if something is a parasite or is a tiny being which is causing a lot of illness for yourself, in my opinion, it is appropriate to have compassion for oneself as well. So you do that. It may not be the best karma to kill that being. It's in a gray area somewhere, but nor is it going to be a very bad karma. It's not going to be very bad because the being is not a very evolved being. It's a very simple being. Yeah. And secondly, you're mostly coming from compassion for yourself, looking after yourself, not so much because of ill will for that being. Yeah. So it's not going to be a very bad karma to do that. And sometimes, just to have a good life, I think it is appropriate to do it. That's my opinion about that. Venerable, what do you think?
Well, I was just thinking in the Vinaya, very often it talks about whatever has breath, even in the precepts, isn't it? So it's a breathing being, and then it's the size of it. They were saying bed bugs, or the eggs of bed bugs is kind of in the Vinaya where the line in the sand is drawn. Yeah. And the other thing that comes to mind is, we don't have cats in the monastery anymore, but there were times where we did. And one of the jobs was to apply the front line on the cat to make sure it doesn't get parasites or it doesn't get ticks. So that is also one of those questions that might arise for pet owners in the world. Yeah.
But the breathing thing is a hard one. I mean, what does it mean to breathe? Does it mean that you metabolize? Because metabolize means the use of oxygen. And bacteria, apparently, they mostly metabolize. Virus do not. So maybe the line goes between bacteria and virus.
Sure. Yeah, well,
I don't know. It's a hard one.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we should move on because
I hope
time is getting...
Yes, okay. So that was... right not killing.
Right killing.
No, that was right compassion.
Okay, not right killing.
Not right not killing. So now we're moving into stealing or into not stealing. So the sutta is with Chunda from the Anguttara Nikaya, and it goes as follows: they give up stealing. They don't with the intent to commit theft, take the wealth or belonging of others from village or wilderness. You can hear my accent, German accent coming through here. The V's and the W's are hard for us.
Why does it have village and wilderness? Is that strange, isn't it?
Well, isn't that a separation in the sutta to kind of say one is where the king is ruling and the other one is the wilderness where the king doesn't have any rule? Was that?
So why doesn't it say just you don't steal? End of story. Yeah. Who needs to know the distinction between village and wilderness?
Well, maybe some people thought, they go into the forest and they take something and then it's like, it's okay.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
I mean, in the Vinaya, there was this kind of story of monks taking wood or something and then it belonged to the king. Yeah. And that was a problem. Yeah,
that's where I think it comes from. It comes from the Vinaya, the monastic rules on stealing, and that's where they make that distinction because of the way people were thinking. Yeah.
Aranya.
Yeah,
and
Aranya.
What is the other one? Village?
Gama.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. But here again, it's clear that we have the intention to actually thieve, to take something which is not ours. So we know that very often in the suttas, there is also the question, if something has been relinquished, if something has been thrown away, then it wouldn't be considered a theft. But as we will hear later down the track, we still try not to take things that we don't know have actually been offered or have been given, especially for monastics. Yeah. Okay, so now Ajahn Brahmali brought this concept in of degrees, like degrees in killing. So let's see if we can have some degrees in stealing here.
Doctor degree.
Doctor degree, well.
Master degree.
So I guess we all agree for those big ones, robbing a bank or stealing someone's property or stealing cars or whatever. Yes, that is definitely stealing, definitely not recommended. But again, sometimes if you grow up in certain families or surroundings, that might feel like the right thing to do, unfortunately, if you are conditioned the wrong way. Now, if you are taking things from your workplace or from your office, so how far does your understanding of stealing go there? Is it like, oh, well, you know, it's okay, it's actually for work, and I'm just, you know, kind of borrowing it?
What happens if you, let's say that you're in the workplace and
Yes.
you take something,
Yes.
and then afterwards you feel really bad, so you go to your boss, and then the boss says, oh, that's okay, you know, we accept that in this company. Yeah.
Sure.
Was it still bad karma, or was it not?
Well, I mean, you will feel bad about it, but as I mentioned before, it was given, it wasn't explicit or whatever, and it was almost like, well, it wasn't discarded, but it's okay, then I would say there's no problem.
Yeah, but it's okay, no problem from a criminal point of view or karma point of view? Karma point of view?
For a karma point of view as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you would have it depends what intention you had when you were taking it.
Yeah,
but with those petty things, I don't know, but I'm assuming you're not kind of taking a pen from the office and going like, ha ha ha, I'm stealing this now. That would be a very different intention.
Yeah, well, if you go to your boss afterwards and say, I'm sorry because I made a mistake, and the boss says, actually it was okay,
Sure.
then obviously you felt a bit dodgy about it. So I would say
Sure.
you still made bad karma at that time,
Right.
but it turned out to be, things turned out to be okay after all.
Right, and then
So
you would
still
know
have
for the next time that
Yeah.
it is okay to...
Yeah,
Sure, okay.
it's okay to steal next time, yeah.
It's okay to steal. No, it's not stealing at that point. Then, I mean, one of those other ones that people often, you know, think about or get perplexed about, avoiding taxes, avoiding customs, avoiding fees. That could also be considered as stealing. I mean, in the Vinaya, it's one of the things that I remember we would discuss, you know, as monastics, if we take things from one country into another country. And I remember there was a picture that my father was offering to his relatives. And I was going there, but I felt very uneasy to just, you know, take it in my luggage and go there because I didn't know, you know, how much it's worth. And if I would be avoiding those taxes, it is considered stealing in the Vinaya, so have to be careful there. Okay. Using copyrighted content. It's one of those ones we very often, some of us have debates about. So these are just some of the questions I wanted to bring up. Of course, we try to avoid it. I mean, speaking for myself, sometimes when you are putting things on YouTube and all these things, if you do read through the rules and you start to realize, you know, it's actually for an educational purpose and you're not trying to make any money with it, then it might actually be okay. But it really depends on the type of copyright that is there. And there is a lot of copyright-free pages these days, and I switched, I think, about 2 years ago, so I might still have some old picture material in some of the slides I'm using, but from that day onwards, I always try to go to Pixabay, for example, is one of them, where they say these pictures are given for free, these pictures are to be shared around, there is no copyrights on them, just to make sure. Because there was also one of the monks in Melbourne was presenting a little clip of a video, and they were live streaming it, and then within 24 hours it was taken off the internet. Because these days they have machines who actually, you know, find out algorithms, they find out about the music which is used, they find out about movie clips which have been used and which might be copyrighted. So it was taken off the internet, and they felt a bit bad about the whole thing because it's a bit embarrassing, you know, you get a copyright strike. But they did write to them, and it was released afterwards because they said, look, this is not for a commercial purpose, and it is for teaching. So it is fine. But anyway, it's something to consider. Borrowing things and not returning them. So you haven't really stolen them, but you're taking something which was okay, you know, the person allowed you to borrow it, but then it kind of never really makes its way back. At what point does it actually become stealing? Again, I guess it's really in your mind as well. You know, if you just forget about it, if you a lapse of mindfulness or whatever, and then the person asks you, and you're like, oh yeah, of course, and then you return it, again, it would be much less karma involved there. But if there comes a point and you're like, the person doesn't really need it anymore, and you take it without their permission. I mean, I know we're talking about, very, very grayish areas there. You see, I'm going down the list there, but just for you to maybe think about. And then the same thing here, breaking, borrowing communal items and not telling. I know that's not really stealing. I'm going a bit far there. But then offering to fix them or to replace them. I mean, when I think about this precept of not taking what is not being given, so we were talking about killing before and about protecting the person, the being, and beings in this world, they do treasure possessions. That's just how it kind of works. So it's almost like an extension of another person. So we respect the beings, but we also respect the property of those beings. And then, of course, if we live in a community, I mean, some other monks might be telling you lots of stories about this. You have cars, or you have computers, or you have things that you use. And if it's not yours, very often you don't take the same care of those kind of things. So I encourage you to think of it as if it were yours, in terms of taking care of it and making sure that if something goes wrong, that you actually put up your hand and say, oh, sorry, that was me, can I somehow make it good again? Can I make amends? Okay, good. So, but it's not just stealing. So if we go to Digha Nikaya 2, the Samanapala Sutta there, it says, they give up stealing, they take only what's given, adinadana, and desire only what's given. They keep themselves clean by not thieving. And Ajahn Brahmali gave me a little riddle there, was asking me why they keep themselves clean and why it doesn't arise with any other precepts, this kind of phrase. And I offered some solutions, but I don't think they were up to scratch. What is your...
It's not working anymore. I can't say anything. It's out. This doesn't work here.
Oh, maybe the battery is getting low.
Lights is still here. Hello. No.
Well, once I take my one off, then it's very hard to put it back on again. Aha, we're getting some replacement there. Oh, batteries. Okay, so maybe I carry on and then. Oh, there we go. We have a microphone.
I don't have anything to say.
Oh, you don't?
I was feeling so lucky because I didn't have anything to say. I was feeling.
You want to just hold this off? You're going to get them.
Sure. So it was just a question with no real answer.
No answer, yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody else has an answer to that question.
I don't know. Okay,
question.
you can think about it. Because apparently, yes, this is the only times it appears in the suttas that way. I don't know. What came to mind to me is you keep your nose clean. That's what we say, But it would be for the other ones.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
But, if killing and stealing, they would all be criminal acts in that sense. So.
Yeah.
And they would definitely have an impact. And you're arguing that killing would be, much, much stronger one, and that's why it comes first.
Yeah, it's interesting why they use this idea that you keep yourself. It's actually the Pali word is suddha, I think, or suddhi, something like that. It means pure.
Right.
So you keep yourself pure by not stealing. And I just always wondered, why does it occur with stealing and not with any of the other precepts? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I don't know if anyone has any idea about that. Is there something about stealing that makes you feel particularly impure, perhaps? Does anyone have any lot of experience with stealing a lot? Please come forward. Yeah, please. Okay. Can we please wait? Yeah, are you going to be here? Yeah, because I'm concerned with us running out of time so fast.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
So let's just carry on, Venerable.
Right, sure. So the point I was trying to make here is that we're moving from stealing to only taking what is given and not desiring things that are not given. So that is actually quite different. And I tried to come up with a few degrees in this one there as well. So only taking things when invited or asked first of all to make sure they are on offer. And for the monastics, again, that's something important. We don't just go to the kitchen and help ourselves to a sandwich or whatever it is. So we have to be offered these things, and even the medicines that we are using have actually been offered to the Sangha, and once they've been offered to the Sangha, they go into the stores, and then the monks have access to them. So for us, it is actually something really important, which also has to do with simplicity, frugality, and not having access to so many things. The more things you have access to, sometimes people also ask, why don't you have money? Once you have money, you don't just have the money, you have access to so many things. Why don't you have cars? Why can't you drive? Once you have a car, you can do so many things. So it's like there is so many desires that can be fulfilled by these kind of things, and I think those are guards to help us renounce and to have less of these things happening in your life and reflecting on them more, so they're not just there for you for the taking. Taking more than what was offered. So very often we also get offers as monastics for a certain period of time or for a certain amount of money. So we want to be very, very careful that we don't go beyond what has been offered by the generous lay people, because we depend on these things. And of course, you as lay people do depend on other beings in this world as well. So yes, one thing I was there, I mean, if you have insurance claims and things like that, that also ties into being truthful. So do you kind of add a few more jewelry when a burglar came to your house, or do you add a few more things when your car got smashed and you say like, oh, well, that happened before, but I just put it under this kind of category there. Are you stealing from that company? I, of course, know then people will always go like, oh, it's a bad company, I can... we try to justify, but just to reflect on these things. And I also thought about exploitation. So if you are in a business, of course, you want to make profit, but it's very good to have an ethical approach to the whole thing and to share whatever you're getting with the people that are working for you, or to making sure that this is not, out of the world what the profit making is, that you actually know your limits, you know your bounds there, because you're almost like stealing from some of the people who are being exploited through the process. But just that you know, I mean, these are really, really fine points, And of course, also overusing resources, overusing the land.
Does that include, like,
yes, please.
Giving people like medallions, and like monks the best medallion, and then you sell the medallions? Is that part of that? Well,
that would be a wrong livelihood.
Like the previous one?
Previous one?
Yeah.
Exploitation and
excessive profit, yeah. Is that part of it? Do monks also do this kind of thing? Is that what I'm saying, I suppose?
Well, no, hopefully not.
Hopefully not, okay.
But in right livelihood, we will talk about this. I mean, we should...
Okay, that's true. We're coming back to this later on.
Do all kind of things.
Good,
so
good.
In this sense, I was more thinking of lay people there.
Yeah.
But again, everyone will have their own way of interpreting these kind of things.
What is the maximum amount of profit a monk can make on a medallion? Is that those important questions? Okay,
I don't know.
Later on,
we shouldn't really barter and do business. Yeah.
We'll come back to
okay, so overusing resources, overusing the land, taking more than is actually given, and then if you want to reflect, sometimes also, using up time, using up space with other people. It's kind of like a precious possession that we all have as well. So anyway, just a few thoughts. Right, but of course we always talk about the opposite here as well, which are the beautiful parts to actually develop and grow. And the opposite of taking is giving. So sharing, caring, generosity, charity, and that is actually mentioned in the sutta on many, many levels. And it's often also mentioned as the first step, dana, sila, bhavana. And also when the Buddha talks about, or when people come and talk to the Buddha, it often has this gradual way of how it evolves, and giving, sharing, generosity is very, very often mentioned first of all, because it's something which makes you feel good. Wealth in detail. Now, but that is the spiritual wealth, Anguttara Nikaya 7, and what is the wealth of generosity? It's when a noble disciple lives at home, rid of the stain of stinginess, freely generous, open-handed, loving to let go, committed to charity, loving to give and to share. I think that sums it up quite nicely. So this is called the wealth of generosity. So generosity is a wealth. We are hopefully very wealthy in that respect.
hopefully, does that mean maybe not?
Well, some more, some less.
But this is quite a high standard, isn't it? It's very hard to get to that standard. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's always nice to aspire to something.
You know this standard. Who is defined by this standard?
Aha. Well, it says the noble disciple there.
Yeah. So it's basically the areas are defined by this standard. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you
yes,
become an area, then
naturally.
this happens naturally. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
but we strive.
We strive. Yeah.
With Vajragota, another sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 357. Anyone who prevents another from giving makes an obstacle and a barrier for 3 people. So that's what we talked about last week as well. What are these 3? So the giver is obstructed from making merit, from doing something good. So always encourage people giving. The receiver is obstructed from getting what is offered. But what is number 3? And they've already broken and damaged themselves, it says here. Okay. Anyone who prevents another from giving makes an obstacle and a barrier for these 3 people. Vacha, this is what I say. You even make merit by tipping out dishwashing water in a cesspool or a swamp with living creatures in it, thinking, may all creatures here be nourished. How much more then for human beings? So even really, really small acts of sharing your food with animals and the thought that comes with it, which is so important, that you are actually thinking of sharing it with other beings.
This is very interesting because it shows you how small the difference is between just doing an act automatically and actually making it into an act of charity. It's a tiny little difference. Because you are going to have to throw out the dishwashing water anyway, but if you just make it into an act of, may this be for these beings, actually then it suddenly becomes an act of kindness instead. And a lot in life is like that. It's often what we need to add to a particular situation to make it into an act of merit and an act of that actually helps us on the path. It's just actually adding the intention to the act. And the moment you act the intention, suddenly you turn something that is neutral into something positive. How are you today? You make it into an act of compassion to say that, rather than just saying it kind of randomly or without thinking about it. And so many things can actually be made into something positive by very simple means. Yeah.
And then also with the whole thing of merit making, I mean, sometimes people look down on it a little bit, but very often if people ask what can we do for the departed people and merit making there, again, it just brings up, as you said, this thought into your mind. You're much more aware of the good things you're actually doing that you might not be aware otherwise, and then you share it with those beings. May those beings be well. May those beings gain some benefit from this, if they are still around to gain benefit from it. However, I also say that a gift to an ethical person is more fruitful than one to an unethical person. So if we can lead people and encourage people to give where it's really needed, but where it is also used in the right way, and where there is people who are ethical. So again, here there is degrees as well, like you were saying, with killing, there is a hierarchy if you want to talk about this, and there would be a hierarchy in this as well. And one of the examples I just wanted to mention, which I found very nice, personally was mentioned last week to me by one of the Thai supporters. They have their wedding anniversary. Actually, it is today. And the person was telling a little story to Ajahn Brahmali, saying, he remembered it's the wedding anniversary, so he went up to his wife and said, it's our anniversary coming up. Would you like to have something? And so the wife turned around and said, do you really mean this seriously? She first thought, he's joking. And he's like, no. So she said, okay, I'll think about it. And as the story goes, he said she thought about it for 5 seconds and then fell asleep. No, but he said in the car, it's very, very good. My wife doesn't ask for diamonds or God knows what, so I'll be fine. So she thought about it a bit later. And then she said, what about doing something for my family? So I was, thinking when I heard that conversation, I was like, okay, you want to make a gift and send it to the family or whatever, And then the person said, Oh, yes, we will make some merit. So we will give a donation. We will give money away, not to the family, but to a good cause and dedicated to our family. So that is like another level. I almost had a few tears in my eyes. I found that very, very inspiring, very nice. Okay. Yes, I think that was... Oh, no! There is one more. Pop quiz. What is the greatest gift? Yes, that's right. So Dhammapada, the gift of the teaching beats all other gifts. This is Ajahn Sujato's new translation of the Dhammapada, which just went on Sutta Central. The taste of the teaching beats all other tastes. The joy of the teaching beats all other joys. One who has ended craving beats all suffering. So may we all softly beat suffering without being violent and killing things and taking things. Okay, I think that was... Yes. Okay, 2:30. Yeah. What do you reckon?
I reckon...
You want to take some questions and then take this next session, or...?
Yeah, I don't think...
we should have enough time.
I don't think I want to go any further now, yeah?
Yes, because we talked about a lot.
Yeah. Would you like to ask your question again? Yeah? Yeah.
Aha, yes, sure.
Sorry, I was wondering, with corporations taking over lots of small companies and they are exploiting and it is getting unethical, if you're working for that company, are you aligning with that energy when you know for a fact that there's exploitation in that? Like, that's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yes, but it's one of the things that kind of ties into right livelihood, and maybe we can spend a bit of time on that as well. But I think one of the points that we just have to be very clear about is that in this world, we will cause harm in one way or another, and intention is just so important. So you happen to be in a workplace, and if you just realize, I can't take this workplace anymore, this doesn't work for me, then you first try to move in a wholesome direction and do whatever you can. Make sure I don't have the intention to harm those beings. That's not why I'm here for. And see if you can bring spirituality and just your part into this company without being able to change the whole company around. But if that doesn't work, of course, then you might want to see if there is another job which fulfills your values and views much, much more. But very often, I also would like to tell people, don't, if that happens, just quit your job and then you're in a really, really difficult situation because you can't make a living or whatever. But you try to change it first, and if it doesn't work, then maybe. Yeah. If we have the power to change it, of course, we try.
If we all agreed not to align with it, then they couldn't function, could they?
Yeah, exactly.
True. But I mean, that is one of the... with so many things with the Dhamma, very often we come with the highest point of view and say, if everybody were like this, this wouldn't happen. And I agree, but we would all be in Devaloka if that were the case. Because in Devaloka, these things don't happen. Because our minds have inclined that way, we have created these surroundings, then we find ourselves there. But we are on the earth. I mean, we're going to talk about sexual misconduct afterwards. We're going about talking about renouncing sexual activity. You're never going to achieve that in this world, that there's not going to be any sexuality around. So, you do what you can, move into the right direction.
Okay, shall we take a break? I feel like a break now, actually.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay.
So that's
meditation afterwards.
Venerable. Yeah. So there will be a meditation at 3:00, and then we will see you back and continue the rest of this at 4:00. Okay.